Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start in 2 minutes. I just want to upload one or two documents. But welcome this morning to our office hours. Our office hours on Fridays, every single Friday, British summertime right now. So GMT +1 or UTC +1. Welcome to our show this morning. Today we cover, and for me, this is probably one of the critical elements of professional services. Today we cover professional services, how to run a professional services company, how to start, grow, scale, and manage a professional services entity. I want to just quickly upload one or two documents, and just, I think the idea this morning for me is really just to share what the problems and issues are around professional services organizations. Professional services organizations are often started by an individual that has possibly had a career, a successful career, or has planned that career. So professional services, let me give some examples. So accounting firms, law firms, advisors, management consultants, and even if we look at the one of the major topics that I cover is the private equity, the professional services in private equity in the sense that you have entities that serve private entity organizations or private equity organizations themselves. So private equity organizations are often managed or led by a leader of high quality, high standards, and many times very high and I would say education, experience, knowledge, and also the network. Okay, so today's drive really for me and the Q&A and the office hours, the questions and answers and office hours every single Friday. I want to focus every Friday on professional services organizations. Now, professional services organizations, as I mentioned, often are, I would say, they would be accounting, law firms, management consultancies, any kind of consultancy, any kind of entity where you have one or two really key individuals that have potentially come out of corporate. They've started an entity that could be on their own. They could have started building a team around them, and they are driven by what I call the briefcase, or the traveling suited guy that pitches up or arrives at various entities. He arrives at entities with a toolkit, a toolbox, a blueprint, potentially a network, or even just a number of things that entity potentially wants from them. So let's take a management consultant as an example. There's a particular issue at a company. They might find the individual on a website somewhere and invite that website to come and have a look at their company and assess, and then potentially provide some solutions. So in goes the suited guy, or these days people don't wear suits so much, or ties at least anymore. We wear jackets, especially the men. The ladies wear nice outfits. But if you go in there with your briefcase, and you become almost, if you're a management consultant or an accountant or a lawyer and so on, you become a Mr. Fix-It. But in essence, behind you, there are potentially only a handful of individuals or people around you, or you have a network of outsourced individuals. So professional services organizations in today's world are entities that are quite flexible, made up of highly skilled, highly experienced individuals. I would say professional services are often run by people with 15, 20 year plus experience, and generally are really, really good. And I'm going to say this, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but really good technicians in what they do. So an accountant, a lawyer, a management consultant, anybody with a skill set. If you look at private equity, if you look at people that do mergers and acquisition work, anybody that goes out and does some kind of consulting, marketing consulting. These days, they are what we call interim management or fractional work fractional or part-time, CFOs, if you like, or financial directors that go out and support firms, people that do it on part-time basis, people that take on projects and so on. So from these Friday morning sessions, I want to focus on those entities, and there are literally thousands of them. Entities are either made up of a single solopreneurs, or they're made up of small teams. But the second point I want to raise, and that is really it's not so much just being a technician, but it's really much more around. I would say that it is nearly impossible to scale that kind of business. You could potentially build a small team around you, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 people if you're lucky. 25 maybe becomes a bit of a ceiling, but then you've got to start relying more and more heavily on the people around you, the quality of individuals, the I would say the luck of having the right people, the right clients, and so on, and the difficulty. And these are some of the key aspects. One is really that it's driven by a technician. Number two is that many times that this becomes quite a hungry monster, but it's a hungry monster as in you got to keep feeding the people around you. But the briefcase person, and again, this is nothing against any professional services people or individuals. In fact, I'm one of them, how I started. But you end up traveling, you end up doing Zoom or Teams meetings endlessly, providing support, advice, tools, etc. But in essence, professional services organizations often are self-employed or a form of self-employment. Now, there's a massive difference between self-employment and running a business. Now, running a business, the definition of a business is an entity that runs itself. If I'm a financial services sales or consulting, or let's say I sell financial services, or I sell mortgages, or I sell any kind of financial products on my own. I mean, I'm a broker of some sort, and I provide that. I do M&A work, and I'm a broker on the sell side, and I find entities that want to sell their businesses. I often have potentially a technician that goes out, does a bit of work, puts together an information memorandum, maybe has 1 or 2 teams with a bit of graphics, and maybe if someone that helps with documentation, some information gathering. But essentially, it's a bunch of technicians, let's say, number one. Number two, people are often self-employed. In other words, you do the work as well as you try to run the entity. The third point I want to make around professional services, and these are often the challenges that professional services organizations face, is that it becomes incredibly difficult to automate the organization, because automation requires standardization. Automation requires systemization. In other words, every time I get a new client, do I have a system that I could almost plug and play? I'm not saying set it and forget it. I'm talking about plug and play as in something that's repeatable, it's consistent, it is something that I could deliver again and again and again in such a way that my clients keep coming back to me and I'm known for something. And where professional services organizations often struggle is the differentiation portion, because often it's very, very difficult to say, how do I sell an intangible product, something that's invisible? I put myself forward as, let's say, a private equity mergers, acquisitions, integration specialist. Then the question arises, that's nice, but what is it that you can really do? And then the questions often arise as in, where have you worked? So the client often has to try and decipher why you are different, why they should use you as opposed to everyone else out there. Becomes incredibly difficult. So you've got a technician You got an individual that goes out and is incredibly highly experienced, well networked, often gets a lot of work through what is known as word of mouth. There's no marketing or sales system in place. There's very little differentiation, and it becomes an incredibly difficult uphill battle, non-stop uphill battle to run one of these, let's call it professional services entities. If I'm an accountant, I would have maybe the 1, 2, 3 partners in the accounting firm. I would have maybe one or two managers, administrators, and so on. And then I would have a number of, let's call it junior staff that we can do a lot more of the, let's call it the lower level work at the lowest possible pay, so that I can maybe, generate some revenue. And many of these professional services organizations, again, another point I just like to raise, and that is often work on this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 principle. Sort of 1/3 cost, cost of employees or cost of staff, 1/3 overhead and others, and then the other third, and I'm talking about income and revenue, the other third could hopefully be a little bit of income and profit. So 2/3 often of most professional services revenue often go to the cost of running a professional services organization. And you can look at this across the board of any professional services. And you could probably count hundreds, even if you go and Google or search. Professional services could be like architects or individuals that provide any kind of specialist knowledge or kind of support to their clients. So professional services organizations, if I try and summarize, you often have a technician involved, not a business person, a person that's self-employed and employs a bunch of other self-employed individuals. So you have a few partners, as they sometimes are called. They also come with a wealth of experience. You can only take on that many clients in a year. So you might take on 3, 4, 5 clients, maybe 8 or 10. Then you're at capacity, because then the quality of the work starts to go down. That means there comes a point where you hit the saturation point. Very, very, very difficult to scale a professional services organization. My channel, if any of you do watch it, it's the mergers and acquisitions, the actual post-merger integration or post-acquisition integration practitioner channel or podcast, where I talk mostly to integration practitioners and specialists. Some of them are fortunate enough, and depending on your view of the world, if you work for a corporate environment, you are sheltered often within that space. You might get a budget, you might get a constant flow of new deals to work with, you might constantly get a lot of things that are done for you in a corporate environment. But the temptation, and yesterday I had a really good conversation with one of the M&A, one of our M&A guests, and I don't want to mention names, but I'd much rather just say that it was fascinating to listen to his story of where he had made a decision, where he was in corporate. He had made a decision, had a discussion with his wife, had made a decision to go into the consulting world. Took him a few years, did a bit of research, did a bit of asking around, and in the last 4 years has absolutely thoroughly enjoyed his journey, I would say, and his working with companies as an integration specialist. There is a however, though, and there is an end point or a sort of a point at which you can only do that much. Now, there is an old African saying where the saying is a lot about that the people get finished, the work never does. We run out of time. As we get older, although we become more experienced, more knowledgeable, we pick up a much larger network, tools, etc., etc. As we become older, we do, however, become slower. We become less effective. We become probably sometimes a little outdated. We also become less effective in a faster and faster moving world. So there comes a tipping point, I would say, and it's not a nirvana situation or a top end situation. When or if you ever want to exit your professional services organization. I remember the story of an architect. He had worked as an architect for 45 years. He was absolutely brilliant. He had delivered the most wonderful buildings, him and his construction colleagues and so on. And he had delivered, I mean, there are landmarks littered across multiple cities across the world. He had done an incredible job. And it was him and a few partners. And this architect, unfortunately, had got to the point where he started picking up Alzheimer's, and it was just not, his health was just not doing well, and he needed to exit the entity. But this is where the problem came in, and this is an example of that is repeated so many times, and it's almost difficult to mention how many times. But when he tried to exit, his partners were saying, but there is no value in the business, and even if there was a value, there is no immediate large lump sum of cash available for you to exit and go and have a retirement for the next 10, 20, 30 years, for however long you still continue living. And I think that's the challenge with professional services organizations. When you're in it and you're in the trenches, you're loving it. It is absolutely, it's challenging, it's rewarding, you're meeting great people and all that, but you're not necessarily systemizing that business. You're not necessarily creating wealth for yourself, and you're not creating for yourself an exit opportunity at the end of the journey, because the journey does come to an end. So these are the various challenges, and I wanted to try and, in these sessions, in these office hour sessions on Friday mornings, I wanted to try and focus on professional services organizations. And it could be any. It could be private equity, venture capital is the same sort of thing, where venture capital professional organizations often are made up of a group of really highly skilled individuals. They can do deals. They can source the right kind of entities. Or you have professional services guys that would go out and maybe even do acquisitions, build a few businesses, put together a bit of a platform, and then sort of level off and go nowhere after that. They build a level of wealth, but stagnate. One of my core questions to a professional services entity is, are you actually looking at disrupting yourself and your business model that you think should work? So where are we right now in this conversation? The conversation really is around professional services organizations. Could be anything: accountants, lawyers, architects, private equity. Even if you look at family office environments, people that work within family offices themselves get to a point where at some stage you've got to hand over the reins. Have you done enough to systemize that entity to a point where it's got value, it's got continuity, it's got that consistency of delivery? So if I look at, again, professional services organizations, you can say, okay, you've got technicians. They're really, really, really good at what they do. They got the tools. They've got a set of clients that often are in repeat mode. So you might get work, you might get work again, and you just think you've got a great business, but in fact, you're just self-employed. So that's the second point. So the first point is you're a great technician, but you stay a technician. The second point is you are self-employed. So you have to still put in the hours. You still have to go and generate the meetings. You still have to go and build those networks and those places of interest. The third point is really how do you deliver consistently, and how do you create a system that is repeatable? So yes, we build tools, and we have templates, and we have a whole host of things that we do instinctively. One of the key things that happen in professional organizations is the one-stop shop mentality, is where, look, I can do all these skills, but I can do it in any industry. They don't necessarily narrow the focus, don't necessarily get involved in niches, because the next job that comes is going to pay the next set of bills for the next 3 to 6, 12 months, up until that project is finished, and then I look for the next one. So the next point I'd like to make around professional services, and that is that sort of feast-famine environment, where you are working hard, you're getting the contract, doing the work, then you disappear for a while, and you're not really going out looking for new work. You're not really going out and looking for new customers, building the pipeline, and building that revenue stream that you should. And as a professional services organization, that's one of the key things to avoid this feast famine. You get a project, you get 2, 3, 4 projects, you get sucked into the project, and when you look again, the project has come to an end, and then you have a gap in between. You then have to start up the engines, do the phone calls, do the outreach, which is not comfortable most of the time for professional services people, because most professional services people are technicians at heart. They like to do the work. They don't necessarily like to do the business development type of thing. And even if they do, they tend to be rainmaker type of individuals, and they end up spending more time generating new work and struggling to find the people to do the delivery. So that's the next point I'd like to raise, and that is to create a really strong professional services organization, is to have these 4 components. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to share my screen properly, but let's assume I'm going to try and share the screen. Let's assume that we're building a professional services organization that's starting to make some kind of sense. And the purpose behind these Friday morning office hours is for us to get groups of individuals to start asking questions and to build a community of professional services organizations that are starting to engage with the real issue that they're experiencing. Look, there's a lot of people out there saying, do this, do that, add this, buy this software, buy this solution, go on this course. There's universities that are teaching a lot of technical things. But to physically run a professional services organization is not an easy thing. In fact, it's really, really, really challenging. I want to see if I can find a place to upload this. The goal really for professional services organizations is to create the wealth. So no, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do it quick enough, but I'm going to name the four areas that I'd like to touch on. And then next Friday, we're going to go deeper into this. And every Friday, I'm going to go deeper and deeper into this. And for those of you that attend, you're welcome to email me. Let me know if you'd like it, because I do have a bunch of tools. I'll just hand out and give to you, at no cost, and we can always chat about it separately if you're interested. Just drop me a mail, find me on LinkedIn and so on. But these are the 4 components of a professional services organization. Number 1 is really the easier part, I would say, and that is, as a technician, as a professional services technician, the delivery part, the delivery and fulfillment of your client's request is what you hang your hat on. This is let's say I'm an architect and the client wants to build a particular building. It could even be consulting in terms of construction. We can talk about lifts and escalators, I think is a topic. If you think about plumbing and electrical works for large entities, building factories, doing HVAC, which is your refrigeration. But I'm not talking about refrigeration, air conditioning for small things. I'm talking about consulting for big new developments, consulting for a big factory that's being built. That whole consulting environment where you're doing professional services and you're doing the design, the layout, the plans, all that, the knowledge type of things. These are the individuals I'd like to see more and more in my office hours, and even asking me questions going forward. But there are 4 elements. Number 1 is the actual delivery of fulfillment. Now, there are tools and techniques and things that you would be doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be earning an income. So there's a speciality that you have. The question I've got is, have you systemized it? Have you built it? And some might say, yes, I've got it in a folder. I've got a bit of software for that. Yes, I use Trello or Asana, or I use Microsoft Projects, or there are a bunch of sort of bits and bobs of different things. But when I talk about a system, I'm talking about, have you found a way to deliver what your customer wants without you having to be too involved in that? Some of you might say, yes, but I do have a few staff. I do have a few juniors that come in, or I outsource some of the work. But there's a constant move, isn't there? I mean, it's always an organization in flux, because someone who's useful on this project might not be useful on another project. So that person then sits without work, and they disappear and they find something else to do. So there are so many different challenges, but the delivery element is one of the aspects I'm going to be touching on and delving in quite deep, is how to turn a lot of those, let's call it the intellectual property, the experience, the knowledge, the know-how, and those years and years of really blood, sweat, and tears of all that accumulated wealth of knowledge. How do you systemize that in such a way that it becomes repeatable, and it becomes something that you can deliver with less and less and less of yourself being consumed? Now, we only have that many hours in a day, and we can only concentrate that much on a particular project or problem or whatever it is. So the delivery and fulfillment of what you do is one key element. The second key element is, have you got I would say a system or a method of constantly generating new work? And I'm not talking about new work from existing clients. I'm talking about, do you have a system? Do you have the right kind of methodology that you apply, and building and having built a system that operates by itself, that keeps your sales pipeline and your sales funnel full, and is automated to the point where by the time you're talking to the let's call it a new prospect, by the time you're doing proposals, and sometimes it's even tenders, and tenders are an absolute nightmare. In fact, there are better ways of dealing with tenders, which I'll share with you on a future occasion. But have you got a way of marketing and doing your lead generation and automating that entire process? And by the time you get to speak to a particular prospect, that prospect is almost mostly, let's say 90% pre-qualified. You have all the information you need about that person. That person knows about you and what you do. So by the time you meet them for the first time, that conversation has been set up in such a way that it's productive and it's quite useful. And there you quickly find whether there's a fit between yourself as the professional service and the client. And many times the way that you speak is the way the client buys you. So the difficulty with a lot of the sales processes that are in place for professional services is that when the sales process is followed, the client's buying you as the person, the individual, the leader, let's call it the expert. And then if you don't do that properly and do have a proper system and process behind the scenes, and next thing the client sees potentially a junior or somebody else taking over and doing your work for you, and you pop in there once a month and just to double check on things, that client's going to be may not cancel, but may. But that client's not going to be 100% happy with you. Why? Because you made the sale. They bought you as a professional service individual, and they didn't buy, some entry level individual. They bought you with your wealth of experience. So that's the other thing. Who are you targeting? How are you bringing them into your world, and how are you getting that right fit? The third sort of major point, which we're going to be covering in the Q&A around professional services organizations, is the talent side of things. How do you attract talent? Now, in my experience is that most of the time, most organizations have an incredibly, I would say, not unthought through, if there's such a word, process of recruiting new talent. It is often done by means of maybe achieving a sale, taking on a new client, realizing that you can't deliver without additional resources, frantically going through LinkedIn, maybe agencies, maybe phoning your network, maybe getting hold of different people saying there's a piece of work that I need you to come and assist me with, maybe getting hold of an outsourced organization to come in and for a piece of work. But everything is reactive. Things are done after the case. If you're running a really well-run professional services organization, ideally, you want to have an internal recruitment process and a recruitment department, if you like, or maybe at least one or two people that are full-time recruiting, whether you need people or not. And recruitment, in my mind, often sits alongside marketing, because these days, with the great resignation, as they call it, or the rethink of many people in their careers and the way that they are approaching life, especially the kind of talent that you need to attract. If you're not marketing your organization as the organization for someone to work with or for, in order to deliver to your clients, you are not going to be able to deliver high quality work, because professional services organizations often rely heavily on the quality of the people that you employ or outsource to or engage with, or even if it's additional suppliers that white label themselves. Like, that's the big new word these days, where they white label their services and you just put your brand on top and then you say, hey, this is me. I know of one IT professional that I think he works out of his garage. He set up a little office, and if you look, his background looks quite fancy and looks like he knows what he's doing, but in fact he's just got a PC and a telephone, and he's gone to an organization that's white labels all the MSP work, the managed service providing work, let's call it the IT professional work, so the networking and the configurations and even the support desk help is all white labeled. So when he goes out and he sells, he's selling, in essence, he's just the salesperson for the white label company. Yet he puts himself forward as a professional services specialist in MSP and IT consulting. When you do start engaging, you quickly start realizing that, in fact, there's no infrastructure, and it looks entirely like an empty shell that's backed by an alternative organization. And then you wonder, is that truly a proper professional services model? I question that. I'm not sure whether that's really what your clients are buying. Your clients are not buying your ability to sell someone else's white label product or service. But I mean, that's a conversation we can have in one of the sessions to come. So I've covered delivery and fulfillment. I've covered making sure your pipeline is done in such a way that it's constantly being filled, but also it's being filled and qualified. And by the time you meet the individual or the person that you're selling to, or that you're trying to engage with, that by the time you have that fit or strategy call, you have it in such a way that that person understands who you are and what you represent, and also avoiding the danger of selling just yourself, that they not end up buying you, but they end up buying what you represent, and that you've thought through your actual product and what you're offering. So number one is delivering fulfillment. Number two is the pipeline. Number three is ensuring that you've got a constant flow of really good or access to really good talent, and not just white labeling someone else's service. And then the fourth element is I think one of the parts that get missed almost entirely, and it's for me it's even a blind spot for 90% of the professional services organizations that I speak to. This is a blind spot around systems and platform and your delivery, not your delivery model, but the way that you are presenting your service. Now, let me just try and explain that properly. When we are selling an intangible or an invisible product or service, not product, as a professional services organization, we are selling something that's intangible. So the client has to experience that service first before they actually know whether it is exactly what they've bought. If you're buying a tangible or a physical product, let's say a motor car, you can quite easily take it for a test drive. You can get in, you can smell the seats, you can start the engine, you can turn the steering wheel, you can look in the boot, the engine. You can do a physical inspection and a visible, tangible view of what it is that you're buying. When we are looking at an intangible or invisible service, the difficulty that we have is the client has to often buy on trust. Now, if the person's buying on your historic, your historic sort of your CV or your resume, as some people call it, and they say, okay, well, you've worked at this company, worked at that company, you got this experience, you got that experience, and your team has got this experience, that experience. This is your background, your reputation, etc., etc. So therefore, I'm making the assumption, and I'm betting or gambling that you can deliver on what you say you can deliver. And then one of the big questions come up, which, I mean, there's obviously always two questions, is how does it work and how much does it cost? And if it comes to how much does it cost, often professional services organizations have rate sheets or per hour rate or a per project rate, or you can quite easily put together a costing, and you could say, look, that project or whatever it is I'm going to, IT professionals are very good at that. Lawyers already have their rates, accounting firms for specific services. And often it's explained, your services and that are explained in a manner that's sort of functional. So it's, if I'm buying a computer, you get some kind of PC, you get a box, you get some wires, you get a screen. It's got these statistics, if you like, and configurations. It's got that software on, and that's the price. It's very functional. If it comes to services, it could be, yes, I can do, I'm an architect. Yes, I can do the drawing. All right. Yes, I can go and do a site inspection. Yes, I can do this, that, the next thing. And it becomes this sort of almost a to-do list or just a list of stuff I can do. Where when you really look at your services, what a customer is really buying is not necessarily, I had this really interesting conversation with a client of mine, and in fact, this is how I want to just frame it, and maybe I could illustrate this when I learn how to upload and do a screen share. But what we had done is we said, okay, let's look at the technical aspects of what you deliver In other words, the to-do list, the list of stuff that you do. And then on the flip side, let's look at the customer journey. Let's look at your client journey or your investor journey. If you're private equity and you're looking for investment and you're looking for investors to come with you on a journey, let's look at those two separately. And in fact, what we did was we said, let's put all the stuff you do in a circle on a diagram. And let's put the customer journey in a rectangle. In other words, what does the customer really want from you? One of the upcoming office hours, we're going to go through how to map out your customer journey and also how to work out the things to do list. So at each step in the customer or client journey or investor journey, there are going to be things to do. But in that rectangular box, is if you put yourself in your client's shoes or your investor's shoes or and so on, what is it that you would like to know? So I'm going to use an analogy. You would like your car, your vehicle to be serviced, right? So you go and, if you know anything about motor cars, I'm basically going to talk about things like I'm going to talk about things like oil change and a filter change and spark plugs and so on and so forth. But if I think about going down to a mechanic store or something, and I say to the mechanic, you know what, Mr. Mechanic, I need a service for my motor car. And the mechanic then goes off and tells me, what kind of spark plugs he's going to use and the size of the filter and how he's going to undo the filter cap and, take the old one out and put the new one in. And he's going to go through a whole technical explanation of how he's going to do my thing. And then I must now, having no, let's assume I have no knowledge of what servicing motor car is actually about. And then he goes off on a tangent and telling me all these technical things. I'm going to think, well, it sounds pretty much okay. It sounds like he knows what to do. I give my vehicle in, and the next thing I go and fetch it. It comes back dirty. Now all of a sudden there's a noise as I'm driving. It's not driving well and so on. But it sounded as if that person knew what they were talking about, because they were talking about the technical aspects, that stuff in the circle as my clients and myself, as we were talking. So all the stuff that you do, you put into a circle. The client experience and the customer journey or client journey or investor journey, you put into a different box, a rectangle. So now I'm going to talk about the circle and the rectangle. And the rectangle then says, what does that person want? Let's say I want to service my motor vehicle. What do I really want that mechanic to tell me? But don't worry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take in your vehicle at 10 a.m. and we are going to put it through. See, there's the bay there. This is where it's going to go. And it's going to go through these 4 or 5 steps. And these 4 or 5 steps are going to be followed. And at the end of it, we're going to take it there to the washing bay. We're going to wash it. We're going to have another person that's going to be, it's a specialist, our quality control person. They're going to take it out for a test drive and make sure that it's working 100% according to the way it should work. And then once he comes back off the test drive, we're going to put it onto another machine, which will then do a test. And then we'll sign it off and we'll give you a call and you can come and fetch your vehicle. And those are the 5 or 6, 7 steps that you're going to follow. And once you've picked up your vehicle, the next day we're going to give you a call. You're going to tell us if you're happy, and then about a week later we're going to then send you a survey to ask if you enjoyed the service and so on, and if there's anybody else you can refer to us. But if you think of the rectangle now, it is the customer experience versus the technical stuff. Now, when you are in the professional services organization, many times all the professional services individuals that are doing the sales are talking about the stuff in the circle, all the technical stuff that they can do, and they very seldom talk about the actual productizing of that service, the productizing and the process of the delivery of that service. So I'm just going to wrap up for today, and we're going to carry on next week, Friday. And the idea then is that every Friday that we start getting more and more people coming in to then ask questions around how to grow and develop and scale. And even if you are in corporate at the moment and you want to exit your corporate environment and you want to start up your own professional services organization, let's talk about the real stuff. There's so much garbage out there about, how to fill a pipeline for, how to get lead generation for professional services organizations, how to build one, how to scale it. And there's a whole lot of things. This is just a straightforward, open forum for us to share ideas on how to grow and develop professional organizations. So I just want to cover and recap. We spoke about professional services individuals that are technicians. They're not necessarily managers. They're not necessarily entrepreneurs. Professional services people generally are self-employed. Their own hours are being consumed often by client work. The other part is struggling to find often the right kind of talent and the right kind of people to deliver. Pipeline is up and down, and we have this feast-famine environment. The other part is then to then start looking at how do I start productizing and systemizing and delivering on a consistent basis, and narrowing potentially my focus in terms of professional services that I want to offer. So thank you very much for joining me today on Office Hours. Office Hours dedicated to professional services organizations. And the reason why I do it on a Friday, is simply because I want to start implementing for you a system or process where you look at this past week. What have you done this past week? What are you doing next week? And how are you doing? What problems, opportunities have arisen? And how are you doing the right things or more and more of the right things? Thinking about your business in a totally different way. And I'm talking literally, the audience here would be people that are wanting to enter the professional services organization, sort of entering the professional services or private professional services, boutique as some people call it, world where you either a solopreneur or you build a team of 4, 5, 6 individuals, and you of highly skilled professionals, and you're building something that you can offer of value. We have people that do transformations, change management, that sort of thing. Or if you're already in it and you are wanting to scale, or you want to do a breakaway, or even you running a department within a big corporate environment, but they are wanting you to take and develop your department, your division properly. Those are the kind of people that are part of this audience. Thank you very much for joining me today. I certainly hope that you enjoyed it and it's been of great value. We'll continue next Friday and every Friday, unless I'm on a bit of a break. I did last week have a replay of one of our really good interviews with Vladimir. But from today going forward, we're going to focus on professional services organizations. Remember the circle and the rectangle. We're going to cover that. Looking forward to seeing you next Friday. Please log in and join. And if you're watching the recording of this, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and like. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Twitch or any one of those, and these office hours will turn into podcasts too. So I'm going to create office hour podcasts. I don't know the title yet. We're going to see if we can try and find a nice title for this. But the goal here is to focus on professional services organizations where we really, truly help professional services organizations of all types to grow, scale, and even establish themselves. And then the last part, which I touched on during today, was exit. Exit a professional services organization where there's no value, where you are the business, is very, 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 very difficult and challenging. However, there is an answer. We can create the value for you to exit on your own terms. But that does take a bit of work, but does also take the know-how how to do that. I'd like to share all that stuff with you. Good luck for your upcoming week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week, Friday. Goodbye.